Okay, section 3. This is about the social and cultural trends of this era. And first we have to talk about this dude named Mark Twain. He wrote books. Maybe you guys have heard of him. And he wrote this book called The Gilded Age. And in The Gilded Age, he talked about how society had a rotten core with gold paint as an exterior. And essentially what this means is we kind of used it as a metaphor for how society was. So the historians call the last 2 decades of the 1800s the Gilded Age, because they're like, yeah, we ended our Civil War, we freed the slaves, we guarantee people equality under the law. All of those things have happened. But when you look deep down, we have child labor going on. We have women who still don't have the right to vote. We have blacks who are being discriminated against. We have Chinese and lots of other people being discriminated against. It's not as great as it looks. But during this Gilded Age, many Americans, especially the middle class, they adopt a new lifestyle. And this new lifestyle is possible because they're earning cash money, okay? And they have extra money left over. And so during the Gilded Age, sports start to become a huge thing. Spectator sports. People start to go shopping as a hobby or as a pastime. And then, of course, there's the popular reading, the books and the magazines and the newspapers. Okay. But like I said, Americans are working for wages. So, if Dalton came and mowed my yard, I'm going to pay him in cash. I'm not going to pay him in chicken eggs. Okay? I don't know. Some people might take them in chicken eggs. Who knows? I like chicken eggs. But anyhow, because people do have this extra cash, this leads us to conspicuous consumerism. Conspicuous consumerism essentially means people see things and they want them, and because they have money, they go out and buy them. Okay? And you might put a star next to this. This is going to be on your worksheet and on your test. The thing that most heavily influences consumption patterns or people buying stuff is advertisements. What they see advertised in newspapers and in magazines, that's what they want to buy. So one of the first companies that got real big into advertising was one of the department stores, Macy's. If you guys have heard of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, they're the guys that put it on, okay? And so Macy's, other than advertising, some of the other things that they did to try and get people to buy products, they offered money-back guarantees, okay? Which is exactly what it sounds like. If you don't like the product, it doesn't work, you can have your money back, okay? And one guy who really took advantage of this was John Wanamaker. He worked in the department stores, I think he owned one of the department stores. But eventually, he becomes the postmaster general. That means he's in charge of the mail. So what he decides is that if you order something from a mail order catalog, like they send you a catalog, you're like, oh, I want this and this and this, and then they ship it to you. He decided all of that shipping would be free. It was like Amazon Prime, okay? But it was, early on in history. And during the Gilded Age, people start to come out with logos and trademarks. Now, obviously, these were not around at that time, but, it got to the point where people are like, oh, you know what? I like tennis shoes. I recognize that brand. That's the brand that I had before. They were comfy, so that's what I'm going to buy again. Okay? Or I had a phone with that logo. I like those. I'm going to get that again. Okay? So it just depends. People start to do that. And Americans begin to have a higher standard of living. Okay? We start to live better. We start to live longer. And a lot of that is due in part to technology. Okay? Technology and better sanitation, it's making people live longer. Okay? And one example that I always think of, and this may come a little bit later in history, is the refrigerator. Okay? Before, I don't know, you guys, if you have leftover food, I put it in a container and put it in my refrigerator. When I get hungry, I reheat it. My grandparents, when they have leftovers, they just set them out on the stove, and they may leave them there for 2 days, and they still eat them. But that's what they used to do back when they were little kids, because they didn't always have a refrigerator. They didn't have a refrigerator when they were growing up. Okay? And even though that's unhealthy, over time we figured out, oh, there's better ways to, do things with leftovers. Okay? But it helps people to be healthier and live longer. And this new higher standard of living is actually cheaper, because all of these factory-produced goods are less expensive than the handmade goods before. So for example, if you buy a t-shirt at Walmart that was mass-produced, it probably costs like $8. If you go to some designer store where somebody had to hand embroider and stitch that shirt, it's probably going to cost a lot more. Okay? So
Everything.
I don't know. But anyhow, it's a lower cost of living, even though we have more and improved things. And your purchasing power comes from, or having purchasing power gives you this higher standard of living. Okay? Because you can afford to buy these things that make your life easier and that make your life better. All right, so mass culture. Mass culture is what's popular, what's everybody doing, what are they all listening to, all that kind of stuff. Americans become more alike in their consumption patterns. And what that means is everybody's reading the same magazines. They're reading the same newspapers with all the same advertisements. So everyone is wanting to buy the same stuff. Okay? Now, styles are the same, but quality varies a little bit. Okay? For example, when I was in elementary, the big thing to have were Doc Martens sandals. Okay, they're hideous, but that was the popular thing. Well, a pair of Doc Martens sandals cost about $60. And my mom was like, I'm not spending $60 on a pair of sandals for you. And I was like, okay, cool. So we went to Walmart and we got the knockoff brand that was $8. Okay? Now, the quality of my $8 sandals was not near the quality of the actual Doc Martens. Mine fell apart in like a month. Okay, but I guess that's what you get when you pay $8. But anyhow, the quality varies. It's the same thing today. Now, newspapers were huge during this time period, because you guys have to imagine, how many of you, one of the first things you do when you wake up is you get your phone out and you look at people's stories or your news feed or something like that? Probably a lot of you. Okay? Well, back then, people don't have that. So what they do to find out what's going on in the world, they read a newspaper. Okay? And newspapers were really cheap to buy. Yes, sir.
You bought a pair of those shoes?
Doc Martens?
Yeah.
Oh,
Those
no.
look like orphanage sandals.
They're awful, aren't they? They were super popular. And I mean, I was a total loser. So besides having the knockoff brand, my mom made me wear my socks with them because she said it would make them stink if I went barefoot.
You're saying socks with
Sandals are cool.
Maybe now, back in the 90s, they weren't.
Well, yeah, those are horrid.
Y'all wore them
Yeah.
socks that are like this thick.
I gotta look it up now.
Yeah, and my mom, when back then the no-show cuffy socks were popular, well, my mom wouldn't spend money to buy me new ones, so I had the tall ones. I was really a big loser, but it's okay. It's made me who I am today, and I'm fine with it.
These are so
They're
bad.
horrible.
Those are orphanage sandals.
It was the 90s, man. Let me see.
I've had those. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, I had those.
Oh, I feel bad for you.
It was the popular thing. Everybody had them.
The toe shoes.
Oh
my
Toe
God.
shoes. Yeah, I did not have those. Anyhow, we're getting off topic. Yeah, I'm glad that that's all you guys have taken away from my talk about consumption patterns, that I was a loser who wore fake Doc Martens in elementary. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I won.
They're awful. They are awful. Moving on, close your Chromebooks and quit looking at ugly shoes. Okay?
We're getting sidetracked.
We are. Now, newspapers. Joseph Pulitzer, he was a Hungarian immigrant to the United States, and he was one of the major people when it comes to newspapers. If you guys have heard of the Pulitzer Prize in journalism, it's kind of a big deal. It's named after him. But he had two newspapers. It was basically a morning and an evening edition of the same newspaper, The World and the Evening World. But this is what he put out every day. And, you know, he's got competitors. And so in order to get people to buy his newspaper, he had to have a sensationalist article. Okay? He had to have headlines that would catch your attention. So for example, okay, if you see the headline, you're scrolling through your feed on your phone, and you have to click on one of these headlines. You have no choice. Headline A says, Mrs. Edwards wore Doc Martens sandals in elementary. Or headline B says, Mrs. Edwards owned the most hideous pair of sandals ever invented. You're probably more likely to click on headline B just because it's a little more interesting.
No,
So-
you can tell it's clickbait just from the way that they're typing it out. That's why.
Yeah, but sometimes you
I don't
just
wanna
can't
give
help
them
it.
clicks because they're
You just
losers
can't
for
help
that.
it. So anyhow, they would have sensationalist headlines and articles, and they were always truthful, but they might stretch it just a little bit. You know, in the 90s, we didn't think those shoes were hideous. So it's
Yeah,
a matter of
well,
opinion. All right, his biggest competitor was William Randolph Hearst. And William Randolph Hearst, he published the Morning Journal. So those were probably two of the biggest papers out at the time, and they were both sensationalist papers because they were trying to, you know, get readers.
So do they write it like every night before so they could?
Oh yeah, it was published every single day. And I mean, like the Daily Oklahoman is
would
like that.
suck, man.
New York Times isn't the big daddy of the newspapers yet. All right, now mass culture, literature, and arts. I don't know beans about art. Okay, I can talk to you about literature all day, so please forgive me. Literature. During this time period, people liked to read novels that talked about the harsh realities of life. Not because they enjoyed it, but it was like, oh, I can relate to that. You know, like my life is hard, it sucks. Like, oh, that person too. And Horatio Alger was one of the most famous authors at this time. We already talked about one of his books that was a rags to riches story. And people liked that. And that's what he wrote about. He wrote about success leads to hard work. He wrote about moral issues, and people could relate to that. So that's what they really enjoyed reading at the time. As far as art goes, artists were inspired by the city. One of those artists was Thomas Akins. This is some of the stuff he did.
Or like Thomas.
That's all I have to say about that.
He was a boxer.
I think actually one of his most famous pictures or paintings was one that he did of like a human body on an operating table. But I had trouble finding that one, so I don't have it. But apparently the city inspired all of those somehow. Okay, back to mass culture. Education. Public education will expand during the Gilded Age. If you guys remember, because of the Civil War, public schools are now required. You have to have a public school. But now, they make grade school compulsory. Compulsory just means you are required to go to grade school. You have to. Just like how today, I'm pretty sure school is required until the age of 16, and that's when you can drop out. Okay, please don't drop out.
Dropping out, peace.
But grade school was compulsory. So if you've ever seen places that have like 8th grade graduations and stuff, or if they have 8th grade promotion, that's why. Because during that time period, that was like the level that was pretty high achieving. I think some of my relatives didn't go past 3rd or 4th grade.
Hey, that grade school one right there is like cut off on mine.
Yeah, it's like halfway cut off on the bottom.
Sorry. And the number of high schools increased because people are finishing grade school and middle school, and so it's like, oh, hey, you know, I'm kind of good at this stuff. I like learning a little bit, so they go on to high school. And because we have so many people getting educated, by 1900, 90% of America is literate. That means they can read and write. And considering the fact that 40 years prior to this, there were 3.5 million slaves who were not being allowed to have an education, that's a huge deal.
What would you say the literacy rate is nowadays?
It's above that, I would say. Like it's pretty high.
Oh.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in this country, And I don't know like what level of literacy they consider it to be, because I mean there's people that can, you know, read street signs, they can read menus, but they can't sit there and read Shakespeare. And I mean there's a lot of people that fall into that category that can't read Shakespeare. But I mean you can get by and, you know, figure things out. But one thing that was interesting, in schools at the time, they didn't just teach like reading, writing, and math. They did labor skills like woodworking, or probably the best comparison I can give you is like today in Oklahoma, once you become a junior, you can go to Votech and you can learn carpentry or auto mechanic or cosmetology or nursing. You can learn labor skills like that. But we don't teach them in the mainstream setting because all these years ago they decided, oh, everybody's on the college track, which is stupid, but you know, they didn't ask my opinion, so. Anyhow, John Dewey. John Dewey was this guy who was an education guru. He came up with all these new techniques, and he's like, kids learn better by interacting and stuff, and they do, and you know, they come up with a new education guru like every 5 minutes, but John Dewey, folks. There were a lot of women's colleges and black colleges at the time because white men were like, you can't come and learn with us, you're different. I'm like, nah, you feel threatened because I'm smart. But,
Were
you
there
know,
black women's colleges?
Usually black women would be accepted into just regular black colleges. And it really would come down to what the requirements were for each individual. I can't say like in general they all did this or they all didn't. It all varied. But like USAO and Chickasha, that used to be an all women's college. Now, here's the good stuff. Popular entertainment. This is when amusement parks came out. And the guy who came up with the roller coaster, his name is Lamarcus Thompson. And this dude made bank. Okay? He charged like 10 cents per person to ride his roller coaster, and I think you could fit like 20 people on it, and they'd run this thing like 200 times a day.
He's white.
Okay.
Are we sure that's not like Mr. Thompson's great something?
He's white.
Maybe, I don't know, there's no telling. But I have video, if we have time, I'm going to show you guys of the first roller coaster and everything. The first one was at Coney Island, which it's like an amusement park like Frontier City.
Is it still there?
Yeah, Coney Island's still there.
No, like the first roller coaster.
Oh, I seriously doubt it.
They have that celebrate.
But
Lamarcus was white too. That's crazy for white.
okay, anyhow, but Coney Island, they had the food, they had the games where you can like throw the ball at the bottles, knock them over, win your girlfriend a teddy bear, all that kind of stuff. And the thing that was important about that, not everybody could afford to go on a family vacation to the beach for a week. I can relate. I didn't go on a family vacation until I was in 5th grade. Okay? But, you know, you might not be able to afford a family vacation, but you could probably scrape up 10 cents to go ride this roller coaster. So that's what a lot of people did. Okay? They tried to ride the roller coaster. Other outdoor events at this time, Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. Now this was put on by Buffalo Bill Cody, and he was like, I'm gonna bring the Wild West to the city folk. Now in his Wild West show, like he had elephants and stuff. I don't know how that's like Western, but they also had things like Annie Oakley who do shooting stuff, or they do trick riding, or they do roping stuff. They had Sitting Bull, who was a Sioux Indian chief. They do a lot of like cowboys and Indian stuff, and all the city folk came out and they're like, oh, that's so cool, that's what the Wild West is like. And I'm like, yep, the Indians rode elephants to go fight the United States Army. That is exactly what happened. Okay, then we have the Chautauqua Circuit. Put a star next to this, it'll be on your worksheet, everyone forgets about it. The Chautauqua Circuit started out as a camp for Sunday school teachers. Like they go and learn how to be a Sunday school teacher, kind of like a revival retreat type thing. But eventually it expanded. They'd have live bands come in under this big old tent. They'd have moving picture shows that they put on projectors. They'd have storytellers and lecturers come. And it was just, you know, good old family fun. Everybody liked to come on down. But that's what the Chautauqua Circuit is. New entertainment, vaudeville. This is like the precursor to Saturday Night Live, okay? They would have like musical skits, drama, songs, and off-color comedy. Now, it's not near as raunchy as SNL is today, but you know, for the time, it was a little off-color.
SNL hates Trump.
Anyhow, Nickelodeons. This is not like Nick at Night, not the Goop and all that stuff. A Nickelodeon was where you paid a nickel to go watch a moving picture. Now, these moving pictures, they were not like movies today. They didn't have people talking in them. They might be talking, but sound and everything was not synchronized. So you might have people talking over here, but you can't tell what they're saying, and they just have like some background music, like this guy's like riding his bike. I mean, it's really boring, but it actually worked out good at the time because since it didn't have anybody talking in it, you could be from any country and understand it. Like you didn't have to speak English to go to the movies. Like everybody could understand, I guess. And then we had technology and entertainment exhibitions like the World's Fairs, where like the Space Needle or the St. Louis Arch, I think those were built for World's Fairs. People would come all over the world and they would, you know, show off their new inventions, their technology, all this kind of fun stuff. And then spectator sports. Told you guys sports became huge during this time. Baseball became America's national sport. Everybody loved baseball, probably because it was usually played during the day. All the stadiums didn't have lights yet. And so people just leave work, go watch a baseball game. If you've ever been to a Major League Baseball game, it takes hours. Okay, so I'd probably be a huge baseball fan too if I got to get out of work. But if y'all have ever heard the Take Me Out to the Ball Game song, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, that was written in 1908, and now they play it during the 7th inning stretch, always.
He just asked, Major just said that's a baseball song.
It was basketball.
Okay, interestingly enough though, baseball was not segregated until 1900. You guys have probably all heard of Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier. Well, baseball didn't used to be segregated. They had blacks and whites, especially on northern teams. And then when they went down to the south to play down there, the southerners were like, oh my gosh, I cannot step on the same field with somebody who looks different than me. So at that point, they started to segregate. They had the Negro League and then they had the Major League. Okay, and again, it wasn't until Jackie Robinson that they broke that color barrier. Other popular things, horse racing, boxing, football. And football back then, I'm going to show you guys a video. They just wore like a piece of leather over their heads.
When that first started, they didn't even wear helmets.
Yeah, and then they essentially have no padding either. But interestingly enough, they didn't have as many injuries as we do today. And if you think about it, like, this guy is wearing a big old helmet. He's got these pads on. He may or may not feel comfortable with just dropping a shoulder and targeting someone, nailing them. There were some really good hits over the weekend. I forgot what game was it? This guy like flipped over and his feet went back. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, it was awful. Like, it made me cringe watching it. But they didn't do that kind of stuff because you're not going to nail some guy with your head if you don't have protective gear
We
on.
got hit, and we got hit with like 5 different people, and it's amongst the last.
Okay, now let's talk about basketball, the greatest sport on the planet. It was invented in 1891, James Naismith. These dudes were hanging out at the YMCA, and they're like, oh, hey, let's throw that ball into that basket. So they put this fruit basket up here on the wall. And the problem was every time somebody made a basket, they had to climb up a ladder and get the ball out. And then they were like, ooh, let's just cut a hole in it. Ball falls through, boom, basketball. All right, that's all I have to say about that. So, you guys open your 7.3 worksheet.